Hi, my name is Andre Gonawela. Welcome back to the Burn Bag Podcast. Today, we're joined by Jim Hake, founder of Spirit of America, a privately funded nonprofit created in the aftermath of 9/11 to support U.S. national security from the civilian side. Jim pioneered a new model of assistance that works alongside U.S. troops and diplomats in conflict zones, helping deliver life-saving aid, build trust with local communities, and strengthen the front lines of democracy. A Spirit of America is the only nonprofit with a formal agreement to partner with the U.S. military, a distinction that led former Joint Chiefs Chairman General Joe Dunford to call it a new capability, not just another nonprofit. Before founding Spirit of America, Jim built one of the first internet media companies. He earned an MBA from Stanford and was twice named a World Economic Foreign Technology Pioneer. Jim, thanks for joining me here today. I really appreciate it.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
So, Jim, a lot of people don't necessarily know what Spirit of America is. I gave sort of a brief description, but can you sort of tell us the why behind Spirit of America? Like, is it just another defense contractor, for example? How is it a nonprofit? Like, can you explain what makes the organization so unique?
Sure, I'll give you the why, but first a little bit more about the what. So we're a privately funded nonprofit. We do not receive and would not accept government funding, so we're no way a contractor. And we work alongside U.S. military and State Department personnel all around the world and provide private assistance in support of their missions. So we talk to ambassadors, military commanders, special operations sergeants, foreign service officers. We ask them, what are you trying to accomplish in service to the nation and in support of national security? What are you trying to accomplish and how can we help? And that begins the conversation that leads to our support. So there are a lot of examples we'll talk about, but the why behind that is a very simple but important one. With the adversaries that America and the idea of America that we face in the world today, government cannot do it alone. There are gaps between what needs to be done and what government can do. And what Spirit of America does is fills those gaps. And the reason I started the organization, that part of the why, is that I understand that the idea of America is the world's best idea. And after 9/11, I understood that that idea was at risk. That idea was under attack. The idea of a free democratic society, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, is an existential threat to the authoritarian regimes and terrorist organizations that want to discredit and undermine America and what we stand for. So the why behind what we do that is of relevance to us all is that government can't do it all. And Spirit of America has pioneered a way for the American people and private philanthropy to get in the game and help defend the promise of a free and better life.
So, when sort of dissecting the gap a little bit more, I mean, this was an organization started after the September 11th attacks. September 11th was certainly an attack on the ideas of freedom, democracy in the United States of America. But what were some of the functional gaps that you saw in America's response to global conflict? Like, what were these practical areas that and needs that just weren't being met?
Well, I'll tell the story that inspired what we do at Spirit of America. But the biggest gap that I saw was that really at the time, President Bush, in terms of his call to action to the American people, encouraged people to get on with their lives, go shopping and so forth, and to make sure the economy was strong. And there's
Yeah.
logic to that. But the biggest gap I saw was we have millions of Americans who deeply care about America's security, of course, and deeply care about what America stands for, who want to do something, and they're totally underutilized or unutilized, really. And how can we harness the power of the American people was one of the gaps that I saw at a very high level. The specific story behind that led to the starting of the organization was I stumbled upon a National Geographic television show in February of 2003, and it told the story of the Special Forces team in Afghanistan and what that U.S. Special Forces team was doing to help the Afghan villagers in a village called Orgun. It was close to the Pakistan border. And the our soldiers were doing a range of things, small scale humanitarian assistance to help the villagers, live a better life, basically. Sandals and blankets and school supplies and small scale humanitarian assistance. But they were doing that all with help from friends and family back home. And the light bulb moment for me with Spirit of America was to understand, well, there have to be other Americans serving abroad, military or civilian, who are really our frontline ambassadors. And they're serving around the world. They're already there. Our country already has asked them to serve and assigned them with a certain mission. And so I know they're there, of course. And I assumed that many of them needed some help to help the local populations in one way or another. They needed some help from citizens like me to be able to fulfill their mission, achieve their objectives. And I didn't know what each of those gaps would be. And it was a real gift that I didn't know what those gaps were at the time, because it led to asking the question of how we can help. So asking those who are serving abroad, what are those gaps? What are you trying to accomplish? So what the gaps are and what needs to be done in any situation varies very widely, from security assistance that we're providing in Ukraine today to support for civil society organizations in Taiwan to agriculture and livestock health and human health in coastal West Africa. So the gaps vary because the missions vary and the situations vary. And our flexibility is the key to being able to address those situations.
So, I mean, like, certainly, like, right now, right? Like, we're in a very precarious geopolitical moment. It seems like America's influence or position in the world is receding, and a lot of people will have questions, right? Like, like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we going and helping these people? Like, why do we need to provide humanitarian assistance? Why not just do it at home, et cetera, et cetera? Like, it's the usual type of questions. But I guess, like, Jim, like, why do you believe that type of work is so crucial to advancing America's security, in the broader world? And I think the story you discussed about the Afghanistan soldiers who are helping with very like small scale humanitarian assistance is a very particularly interesting story.
Well, it's important to understand what the ultimate goal of all the national security activities we talk about. And the ultimate goal of that is to have people choose to be the friends and partners of the United States of America. That's the purpose of it all. And the reason we know that's true is that if every country were like Japan and Australia and Canada, our national security worries would be at the lowest point they could possibly be. And so that is the goal.
Yeah.
Now, it's also fair to say we don't expect that world to ever exist, but that's the reason. Let's call it the unified field theory of national security. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Now that requires, say this at a high level, two things. And one of our board members, former Secretary and General Jim Mattis, puts it in this way. America has two fundamental powers. One is the power of intimidation, and that's what we think of in terms of conventional military power. The other is America's power of inspiration. And you need both. One without the other doesn't work. So the power of intimidation helps contain our adversaries, helps reduce aggression, helps deter the kind of malignant behavior that we see with our adversaries. The power of inspiration and having people choose to be friends and partners of the United States, that is what only gets people to come to our side. Well, and both are important. So the need for whether it's humanitarian assistance or economic assistance or security assistance, all those things are important to have people choose to be our friends and partners, to see that friendship with the United States is the best path to the better life that almost everyone seeks.
So while a lot of other guests who are in the private sector who will come on the program, they'll talk about their capabilities, their technologies. They're very much in the business of sort of fortifying America's hard power. Jim, would you say that you're more in the business of fortifying America's soft power, therefore, given, all of what you're describing? Is it so simple to sort of term all of that as soft power?
No. And Well, it's not. And yeah, I'm not really crazy about the term soft power because
Sure.
maybe influence is a better way that encompasses both. So the hard power is a form of influence, and the so-called soft power is also a form of influence as well. So what they both do is help increase America's influence in the world. And in terms of what Spirit America does, we do not provide any form of lethal assistance. So that's outside our bounds. But we provide various forms of non-lethal security assistance, for example, to Ukraine's military. So we're supporting, through non-lethal assistance, Ukraine's, call it hard power to defend themselves. But that's not soft power. So definitionally, it's more about helping our friends in the fight, really, in that case. And there are a range of things that we can do at Spirit America to achieve that objective. But it's a little bit way of viewing it. I think it's more about increasing America's influence in the world to support our own interests, our enlightened interests, and our security objectives.
So I'd love to sort of dive in to I think your background in Silicon Valley working in tech. How did that Silicon Valley background shape the creation of Spirit of America, shape your own understanding and thinking and curiosity, and perhaps identification of the problems that you saw in the national security environment in the world with America's presence and influence?
Well, as it turns out, while our government and our military and our government institutions have many qualities, the one thing most people who have served in them wouldn't say is, well, we're really good at being entrepreneur. We're really good at being fast and flexible. And it's just, you'd say, well, government's really good and the military is really good at operating at a global scale. You would say that. But being entrepreneurial is not one of them. One of the qualities of our government institutions. So, my background, and I went out originally to Silicon Valley from Philadelphia, and I thought I was going to come back and work in a family after going to business school, come back and work in a family construction business. And about 2 weeks into being in Silicon Valley, I said, I'm not going anywhere. This is it. And it was the most dynamic, entrepreneurial environment I'd ever been in or ever even really experienced in any way. So the thing that's great about that experience and I was entrepreneurial before I went to Silicon Valley, however. I had a little roadside stand trying to sell things at Cape May Point, New Jersey, back when I was 8 and 9 years old.
Nice.
So it wasn't that Silicon Valley, led me to be an entrepreneur. It was already there, but the encouragement and the encouragement for looking at what is possible in the world and viewing that things are possible that most other people might not think are possible, that was really helpful. So how that translated into the work we're doing now at Spirit of America in a couple of different ways. One is, and I've had successes and failures as an entrepreneur. And one of the things that you learn through your failures, and of course, people always say you learn so much more from your failures than your successes. One of the things you learn is you don't want to do it. You don't like it. It's not great. So anyhow, but the other thing is that the key is you need to understand how whatever your business idea is going to work at the level of an individual transaction, an individual customer, because you can't have a million customers if you don't have one. And so how things work at that lowest possible level, whatever your big idea is, was really valuable training for me and training for Spirit of America. The other is that a key to being successful as an entrepreneur. One key is you have to ask a lot of questions, and you're always trying to the holy grail quest is to learn the things that are important, but you don't yet know, and they're out there, and it drives you crazy to you have to figure that out as fast as you can. So asking lots and lots of questions, talking to as many people as you can to formulate an idea and get feedback is also essential. And that's exactly what we do at Spirit of America. And it was extraordinarily helpful to me in starting this organization that has this unique collaborative partnership with the U.S. military and State Department personnel as well, that I didn't think I knew what needed to be done in Iraq or Afghanistan or West Africa or wherever. In fact, I knew I did not know. And so it built into the organization something that's still critical for us today, which is, asking questions and listening, and then starting to synthesize that into a course of action. And so that part of being an entrepreneur as well, 100% relevant. And also, the part about, think about what is possible is, with as a private organization with private capital, Spirit of America has almost perfect flexibility in what we do or don't do, who we talk to at whatever level and whatever place in the US government or military. We have total flexibility. And because we have that flexibility, we literally change what is possible for our troops and diplomats to accomplish. Now, our troops and diplomats are not thinking about what's not possible for them to do, right? So by coming in and being able to change what is possible for them and having that entrepreneurial mindset, it is the perfect complement to what they can do. And that entrepreneurial part of asking questions that lead to solutions and programmatic activity that our US partners, our military partners might not think are possible is a very, very helpful part of having an entrepreneurial mindset as well.
Yeah, and no, and I'm very curious about this particular thread, especially the Silicon Valley sort of background, some of the principles that you've outlined so far, because I used to work in innovation work back in the day, well, really only like about 3 years ago. But very curious about, like when you're creating this organization, you're creating these services, you're looking to address these problems, and you're trying to enable the diplomats, you're trying to enable the troops to get their jobs done better. Who would you say, like, are the end users of these services? And, whenever you're designing a service, whenever you're designing a product, you want to make sure you're talking to these end users. How were these conversations sort of going, especially at the beginning? Were you talking to a lot of the troops, the diplomats? Were you talking to people like, say, like the Afghans on the ground who were being the recipients of some of these humanitarian assistance efforts? Like, how did those conversations go in the beginning, as you're trying to define, I guess, what Spirit of America was?
Well, it was, I'll say, remarkably simple, probably more simple than it sounds like it could
uh,
be, and also remarkably effective. Maybe it was effective because it was simple. That's there's a correlation there too. But we really do talk to whatever level of personnel it is, a flag officer or a sergeant, a public affairs officer in an embassy or an ambassador. What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you trying to accomplish it? And how can we help? And that it is literally that simple to begin a conversation. And we take it from there and listen and ask more questions based on what the initial answers to those questions are. So when you're asking that question, you know basically, what are you doing and how can we help? For people who are trying to get something done, that's like the best thing you could ever hear, right? Because we actually have, as Spirit of America, we have the capability to do it, not
yes.
just talk about it, not just take notes and then disappear. We can make whatever it is happen. And so if you're somebody who, again, serving this country, military or civilian, somewhere in the world, you're out at the tip of the spear. And when an organization comes along and asks how they can help, and they have for us now, it's a 22-year track record of delivering on answers to that question, it goes very well. And to try to find a parallel to that as a entrepreneur in the for-profit sector, you go, well, yeah, that doesn't really happen. There are consultants that say, well, I'd like you to hire me, I can help you. There are investors who are probably the closest ones. A really good venture capitalist, in addition to capital, will really help an entrepreneur succeed in their business far
Yeah.
beyond the money. So that's maybe the best analogy. But we're not looking for equity stakes in what our country's trying to accomplish around the world. We are purely helping, and it's very well received and very effective. And I've been introduced by commanders to their teams who in introducing me in Spirit of America said, "Now listen, you're going to hear about this. It's going to seem too good to be true, but it's not. So please keep an open mind."
Yeah.
And we have no political agenda, no religious agenda, no commercial agenda. So and we have a track record now, so we don't have to do too much convincing on that. That we're actually here to help. So it's that's how it starts and how it goes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a great distinction because you'll have a lot of other organizations more along the lines of for profit who will go to the government who will be like, "How can we help?" Okay, great, we can help, but where's the pot of money that we need to find in the government to pay us for those services? So I think what you talk about with that distinction is being like, "Hey, we're here to help, and we're here just to help." And for our audience, recall that Spirit of America is a nonprofit. And I mean, you are the only nonprofit actually with a formal DoD, Department of Defense agreement. So how did that come to be?
Well, it only took 15 years, and which is actually true. But we really broke ground in terms of the relationship that a private and privately funded organization can have with the U.S. military, or maybe better put, broken ground in terms of the relationship that the U.S. military can have with a private entity. And it required many years of a track record before the issues that were resolved with the agreement with the Department of Defense ever really came to the fore. So we had a track record before we tried to resolve the issues. Um, and I'll just give you an example of one. So there were legal and ethical concerns that arose from time to time that, let's say, let's say a Marine in Afghanistan said that the women in a village that he was serving in needed sewing machines to provide for their families, and that would also help their stability operations in a variety of ways. So there were interpretations of military ethics regulations that led certain lawyers to believe that that was an improper solicitation of gifts that violated the joint ethics regulation. So I'm not going to take you through every lovely
Yeah.
twist and turn of that story, but what ultimately happened was we were able to get language in the National Defense Authorization Act that provided the overall uh, support for a special relationship between the military and the department with Spirit of America. And that language in the NDAA then led to an agreement with the department. And that agreement allows the U.S. military to, it's as simple as talking to us, identifying needs, receiving and distributing assistance, and providing logistical support when the military wants to. It doesn't give us, special rights and privileges or ability to demand things. It allows the military to work with us when and wherever it wants to.
So I want to talk a little bit about that concept of civilian power that, Spirit of America has definitely sought to push forward. What does a whole of society approach to national security mean in practice, sort of when we take a step back and look at the big picture?
Well, for us, a big part of that, and what we touched on earlier, is that we have pioneered a new model of providing citizen support and private philanthropy in support of national security objectives. So our ultimate goal, and what would be, a good way to describe a whole of society approach, is that our ultimate goal is that that is no longer a new model. It's just understood and supported as the way America operates in the world. So every day, wherever, whenever needed, at whatever scale is needed, support from the American people is available to support the missions and objectives of those who are serving the nation abroad. That's what a whole of society approach looks like. That is our ultimate goal, where in ways that are appropriate, whenever necessary, that assistance, whatever kind of assistance it is happening just like clockwork. And so the analogy I would make is, when there's a natural disaster today, people say, well, okay, how can I help the Red Cross, help with that natural disaster? And people aren't thinking, well, gee, I thought FEMA was in charge of that. What's this Red Cross bunch of people doing, right? It's how we do it. It's how Americans get in the game to make something happen that needs to happen on behalf of our nation. So the whole of society and with respect to national security, it's the same kind of idea, which is we don't think about it, it just happens. And the reason that's so important is it's a fundamentally better way to accomplish America's objectives around the world. It's not just a little better, it's game changing. And you'll have one of our other board members, and you referenced them earlier, former Chairman General Joe Dunford said, well, without our citizens and private sector, it's like we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back,
Hmm.
right? And it's like perfect, it perfectly captures the problem of just leaving it up to government. And when you think about fighting with one hand behind your back, you go, well, yeah, that's not good, right? Of course. And, it makes you focus just on defense. You can't play offense. And getting the other hand in the game, which is what we do with Spirit of America, the other hand in the fight, is it changes everything, right? You just don't block or throw twice as many punches. It changes how you fight. And, America, most of the fight is under the radar. There's not a lot of hot fighting going on in the world today. So most of the fighting is under the radar and the war of ideas and so on. We have to win that fight. And we have to be really good at it. We have to draw on all of America's entrepreneurial strengths to do it.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that the organization has done on the ground, particularly in conflict zones, the gray zone, etc. So what does your involvement in Ukraine actually look like, especially since 2020?
Well, I'll mention one thing we did in Ukraine early on. We've been active in Ukraine since 2014. The largest early project that we did was to help the Ukrainians provide an answer to Russian propaganda. So everyone we talked to on the U.S. side, State Department, military, and then the Ukrainians themselves talked about the problem of Russian propaganda in eastern Ukraine that was targeting Ukrainian soldiers fighting in the Donbass, and it was trying to get the Ukrainian soldiers basically to give up and go home. So Spirit of America provided the support to create Ukraine's first armed forces radio station called Army FM. Army
Mhm.
FM is still in operation. It's been in operation since its start up in 2015 through the war and until today. And that is a way to connect the soldiers on the front lines back to the country and not just be bombarded by Russian propaganda. So that was one of our early projects. And as I said, we provided the startup capital and support to get that radio station going. So a good example of an entrepreneurial kind of approach. Since the full-scale invasion, our assistance has been focused on helping Ukraine defend itself and providing non-lethal security assistance to Ukraine's armed forces. So we provided hundreds of surveillance drones. We provided drone jammers that helped the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces disable Russian drones, flying into Ukrainian territory. We have supported military vehicles to help move Ukrainian troops around. We have, early on in the conflict, we provided, ballistic vests, the body armor, bulletproof vests, ballistic helmets, protective gear to thousands and thousands of Ukrainian soldiers. We provided enough protective gear, the body armor and vests and such to equip the equivalent of every U.S. Navy SEAL, every Army Ranger, every Marine Special Operator. So at a scale that was quite impactful. But we've been really focused on helping Ukraine defend itself by supporting those who are leading the charge to help Ukraine defend itself.
Okay, that all sounds really expensive. So, like, how does a nonprofit, how do you provide all of these services, all of these capabilities, all of this equipment? Like, it's like, how?
Well, we're really an expression of the generosity and the commitment to what America stands for of the American people. So those are all private dollars that were donated to Spirit of America So we provided, raised and provided nearly $100 million of assistance to Ukraine's armed
That's
forces
incredible.
along the lines of what I mentioned. And the really, I'll say, apart from Ukraine and how that assistance has saved lives in Ukraine, the I'll say the good news about that support is that it demonstrates what so many Americans care about. And yes, they care about Ukraine, but they also care about America. And Ukraine is really on the front lines of the fight to defend the free world. So many of our supporters understand that that is the case. They understand the humanitarian imperative, but also the national security imperative.
That's incredible. No, that's awesome. So, I mean, Ukraine's very much in the news. Everyone's also very much worried about Taiwan. How do you approach work in Taiwan, particularly on sort of building resilience, but also enabling deterrence?
Well, there are two. So our approach going to Taiwan and our team started to look at how we might be helpful in Taiwan and helpful in maintaining Taiwan's democracy, its freedom, and its relationship with the United States. So we started looking into that over 3 years ago. And the way we started looking into it was, well, getting to Taiwan, talking to people, talking to the officials at the American Institute for Taiwan, folks on the U.S. military side, Indo-PACOM, Special Operations Command Pacific, talking to Taiwanese, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of talking, asking questions, and listening. And because what we're looking for, and this is another reason why we are and need to be a very entrepreneurial organization, is we're looking for opportunities to apply our resources and capabilities to have the biggest impact on things that matter. And finding those opportunities just takes work. They're not usually sitting on a silver platter just waiting for us to see them and pick them up and then do something. So it requires talking to people quite a bit. And in the case of Taiwan, we've been focused on two things. One is security assistance to help to be catalytic to some of Taiwan's asymmetric defense capabilities.
Hmm.
We provided training drones, so Taiwanese military personnel can start to train on drones to be able to know how to use them in a variety of circumstances. And that is to be, again, be catalytic to their training so they can start to develop the capability. And a little bit of assistance in those ways that doesn't depend on typical government procurement goes a long way to accelerating the development of a capability. The other is that we've worked with a number of civil society organizations that are themselves getting Taiwanese citizens more informed about the threats to Taiwan and involved in preparedness, disaster response preparedness, for example. So through the support we provided, tens of thousands of Taiwanese have been trained and been engaged in civil society resilience and response, crisis response activities.
So, how does your work integrate into U.S. military exercises, for example? How do you participate, or what role do you really play in planning environments for the military?
Well, we're having constant conversations with folks on the U.S. military side, and when we're providing security-related assistance, constant conversations on the host nation side too, whether it's in the examples we just discussed with Ukraine and Taiwan. So we're talking to both U.S. military and host nation military personnel just about every day when we're involved in those activities. And the assistance that we provide specifically for training exercises might be, usually training exercises are pretty well planned. So, they're pretty well planned and resourced. There may be some cases where there's some gaps where, certain capabilities like drones for training might be essential to an exercise, where we'll provide those to help with the exercise. But we don't view the exercise as really any different than just a normal preparedness that takes place in training and preparedness that takes place throughout the year on the military side. We're always asking about what the gaps are trying to think ahead in terms of beyond what we're being told is needed, what will be needed in 6 or 12 months after current U.S. military rotate out. So we're in constant communication.
So, what lessons from your work apply to today's broader strategic competition? We're at a very perilous time in strategic competition. I mean, great power competition has very much returned. We face a litany of new, diverse threats that, imperil so much of, I think, the US position in the world, public safety, and so on. So, over the last, 20 years more of doing this type of work, how have you come to understand strategic competition? How do you think we need to improve it, improve our efforts in it?
Well, one of the biggest things is the need for more collaboration with different actors other than the typical ones that we might think of involved in national security. So, Spirit of America is a nonprofit, for example. We represent one of those alternative actors that need to be in the ecosystem, but also American businesses. That it's not only a government effort is the biggest lesson. I would say that we need to tap into all of America's strengths if we're going to prevail. And what that means on the US side, because the government personnel must be in the lead on national security. It shouldn't be a business and it shouldn't be a nonprofit organization. It needs to be the United States government and the United States military in the lead on those activities. But with that, the personnel who are leading those efforts need to know that it's got to be much broader than the government. And it's one of the tough parts is it's challenging enough just to get all the different government agencies on the same page to do something, much less, and people don't really have a lot of experience with private sector organizations and getting them in the game. But it's just essential. So, because without that private sector capability, as I said, it's what we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back. And with that, we will not win. So it's incumbent upon the country as well as the private sector actors to know we have to work together to make this work. That is the biggest lesson. And then the second one is, well, we need to understand the purpose that we're not just trying to deter bad guys, deter our adversaries. We need to get people to choose to be on our side because that is the ultimate source of security.
Absolutely. For our last question, how should civilians understand their broader role in national security? After having heard, the last 45 minutes of our conversation, I think there's a lot of great opportunity. But what would be your advice, perhaps, to those civilians trying to be like, how can I make a difference? Or, to burgeoning entrepreneurs who may want to start similar organizations, but may feel so intimidated by all the challenges that they may face?
Well, the first thing I would say, don't just sit there, do something, yeah, get in the game. And you don't have to have the biggest world-changing idea at the outset. For me with Spirit of America, it began as the most simple, practical idea I think I'd ever had. And as it turns out, that was a really good thing because it allowed it to get started. But if I had thought it was some much bigger idea, which now I understand it to be, but if I thought at the outset that it was more than, okay, well, we're going to talk to these military and foreign service personnel and ask them what they need and how we can help, and that makes sense and that works, so let's do that. If it had started as some bigger idea, I think it would have collapsed of its own weight before it ever got started. So for anyone who's looking at ways that you can help and help serve America and what America stands for, I'd say, well, find something to do. And there are plenty of things to do, but you have to start somewhere and you don't have to make it, you don't have the barrier for your own entry doesn't have to be so high that you never get started with something. Um, and that would be the biggest advice that I would give. There are a lot of ways, of course, people can align with what the work that we're doing. So at least learning what Spirit of America is doing. And whether you support our organization or not, you can at least learn from it and get some ideas about what you might be able to do in some other part of the world.
Jim, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. This has been very educational, especially in terms of dissecting the concepts of civilian power, learning how a nonprofit is making so many great changes and impacting so many lives, and really advancing the idea of America abroad. So thanks, Jim, for your time, and thanks for your work.
It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed speaking with you 100%. Thank you.